The S&P 500 is right near all-time highs. Tesla's bouncing back. Trump's meeting Xi soon. And oil is up 6% on new sanctions on Russia. All eyes are on tomorrow's CPI report, and it's shaping up to be the biggest day of the week.
The S&P 500 and SPY is only $2.50 away from its all-time highs ahead of the key CPI event tomorrow morning. We can see right here, SPY has been straddling key resistance over the past few weeks, especially since October 10th's Friday sell-off. Now, whenever we look at the S&P 500, it's only $2.50 away from this high. If tomorrow's CPI reading ends up bringing in bullish buying pressure, we might end up seeing the SPY break out to new all-time highs. At the same time, if the CPI event goes south and shows that inflation's popping up by a lot, we might end up seeing the SPY reject and fall back down. At the same time, there's even some China updates, so definitely stick with us here. But of course, Mike, the CPI data is what everybody is here to listen about. Of course, tomorrow, 1 hour before the market opens, we will get that CPI reading. Now, we can see right here on the right-hand side of the screen with the year-over-year inflation rate, they are expecting a jump of 0.2% up to 3.1% on the reading. Now, if we look at the core inflation rate month over month and the core inflation rate year over year, the consensus is actually for it to stay the same. But nonetheless, with that year-over-year jump, that does worry traders that we might see inflation rise. And if we do actually jump to 3.1%, that would actually be the highest inflation in nearly a year and a half. We can see that the last time we had inflation at 3.1% or higher was back in May of 2024.
Yep, and Tom, all of the market's focus and attention is going to be directed onto this one report because it's the first major economic report to be released since the government shutdown began on October 1st. So I've been seeing a lot of people calling this like the report of all reports, especially considering we have an important rate cut next week, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. But looking at some data from JP Morgan's trading desk, they see roughly a 65% chance of the S&P 500 advancing tomorrow after this report releases. Basically, as long as the core CPI month over month reading comes in at 0.35% or lower, they are expecting the market to rise. So when this data releases 1 hour before market open tomorrow, the main thing we really want to see is inflation come in either at expectations or lower. If inflation is hotter or greater than expectations, that can be a worrying sign because the Fed is in an interesting position right now where they are starting to cut interest rates to kind of ramp up the economy. But as Tom pointed out, inflation is actually at its highest level in nearly a year and a half, and the Federal Reserve is still trying to keep this under control. So if it comes in hotter than expected, that's definitely a big problem for the Federal Reserve. We have a key interest rate decision next week. So Tom, what's going on there?
Yeah, they are scheduled to actually have an interest rate cut at the next meeting, which is going to be happening on Wednesday, October 29th. Be ready for this. It's going to be a huge event coming up, especially with the government shutdown. And like you said, Mike, there hasn't really been any data releases. So tomorrow's CPI reading, and then, of course, this FOMC meeting next week is going to be huge for the market. But there's a 98.9% chance right now that the Federal Reserve will be cutting interest rates by 25 basis points. The market is pricing in a 1.1% chance that the market will pause, or that the Federal Reserve will pause interest rates. I don't think that they're going to pause. I think that they're going to stick with the script and still cut unless inflation comes in, above, I would say, expectations, even at that 0.35% mark like we talked about with the JP Morgan data. Of course, the market is set to react pretty negatively, at least to JP Morgan, if that does end up happening. But I do think it's going to be a pretty crazy event, Mike, as traders have been looking for this second cut for a while now.
Yep, so we have a very important interest rate decision coming up. We have CPI data set to release tomorrow, and we're basically right at all-time highs. Tom, when we look at the market right now, what are some key levels on your radar? Of course, to the upside, but also to the downside, because I think tomorrow is going to be a lot bigger than most people expect.
So we've talked about this overhead range between 262 and 264 for a while now. Over the past couple weeks, the market's rejected around this range multiple times. Now, in the ultra short term, the SPY has gotten closer to 673. Now, that is going to be the more major resistance that I look at for tomorrow. We've really failed to break out there this week. On Tuesday, this was tested. Now, the all-time high is at that 674 upper end of the range. If we end up ripping through 674 and the CPI reading is good and the market is having positive sentiment following that reading, I will be looking at SPY for a possible continuation of the upside. There's no really established resistances overhead, and there's no telling where SPY is going to stop, but I'm definitely going to be watching the more whole dollar level around 680 as one of the targets and main resistances if we do end up getting that breakout. Now, if we end up falling to the downside, there are a lot of key levels to watch. Of course, the low from the past couple days is right around 663.30. If we end up breaking below that, that's where I will be watching for more of a short-term, play to the downside or just more short-term momentum and selling pressure. Of course, there are a lot of supports, though. I really like the 660 level, 658, and then ultimately, Mike, that low from a couple weeks ago at 646 will really be on the radar. Of course, we would have to have a lot of selling to get all the way down there, though. I would think that one would be pretty far-fetched.
Yeah, and basically what caused that selling was how Trump basically announced that he will significantly increase tariffs on China, and that caused a big scare. And we actually have a pretty big update related to this Trump-Xi U.S.-China trade war, where today it was announced that Trump and Xi will meet next Thursday, October 30th, at the APEC summit in South Korea. This is going to be 48 hours before that 100% tariff increase deadline is set to go live. So, the stakes are certainly very high for this meeting, and it's actually the first face-to-face meeting between these two leaders since 2019 in Trump's first term. And also, this meeting comes at a time where the existing trade truce between the United States and China is set to expire on November 10th. So it's pretty exciting, and yeah, we're set for a pretty exciting next couple of weeks.
Exactly, and I know everyone's been talking about these short-term updates between Trump and Xi, right? They've been kind of hitting at each other, right? Xi will come out and he'll say, hey, we're going to go ahead and do exports on our rare earths, right? Then Trump gets angry and he comes back and says, now we're upping the tariffs by 100% more. It's pretty hilarious how both sides have been hitting back at each other. I'm not going to say it's hilarious in like a stock market sense, but again, it's just crazy how much I would say the back and forth has been. So be ready. This is a huge event. And even tomorrow, Mike, we're actually kicking off, I would say, the more preemptive meeting between China's vice premier and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. They're actually going to be meeting in Malaysia. I saw that Jamison Greer was going to be going to this event as well. This will be going from October 24th to the 27th, and there's no real planned times that I saw for this, but with it being like more of a weekend event, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of different headlines coming out, but a lot of people have been looking at this as kind of the as what's going to really set the stage for the meeting between Trump and Xi that's going to happen in a couple weeks.
Yeah, so we're going to see some big moves from this, but Tom, I'll even say right now we're already seeing big moves in the market in multiple other different senses. For example, if we look at Intel after the bell today, they are crushing it as they are coming back from the dead. They reported earnings. They crushed their earnings estimates. They reported earnings per share of 23 cents versus expectations of 1 cent. Their revenue also beat. They reported a revenue of $13.7 billion compared to expectations of $13.1 billion. And this stock is flying.
I love to see it. And, this is the first report, since the U.S. government became their top shareholder back in August, taking that 10% stake. And they've been having a lot go on. Deals with NVIDIA, deals with even a lot of other companies. Lip Bhutan has really gotten Intel turned around in the short term. And a lot of people were hating on Intel. And I can't really blame them either, though. Intel was in such a good sector. It was a big semiconductor stock in the chip sector, of course, but they didn't really get their GPUs going as well as I think a lot of people would have thought. But they are starting to come back around now. We even had a recent big money play from back in July with this one, Mike, on July 8th. It was a little bit before it tested that $18 support, but again, a $7 million play, which is doing fantastic and still has a lot of time out to March 20th of 2026. But whenever I see Intel, it's really ripping in after hours, and it's well past $40 now as well. I think that could be used as a really good support in the ultra short term, but I'm just glad to see it continuing. I know a lot of people have been looking at it to kind of pull back here as it does seem overextended, but there's a lot of hype and real catalyst pushing Intel higher. And Mike, I know that this wasn't the only thing, running higher today. We've been talking a little bit about oil the past few days as Trump's been stepping up the pressure on Russia with sanctions.
Oh yeah, so basically crude oil is now trading for like just under $62 a barrel. It's up around 5.5% today, and it's up around 7.7% over the past 2 days. Basically, the U.S. announced sanctions on Russia's biggest oil companies, essentially threatening supply from one of the world's top oil-producing countries. As you'd imagine, this has a positive impact on oil prices. And I know we mentioned this yesterday as well, and it's having a positive impact. And we have some stocks like OXY moving up in a pretty meaningful way. And this stock is definitely on my bullish radar, not only for tomorrow, but especially over these next couple of weeks. I really like how the stock is moving up in a meaningful way. This is an area of the market that has been pretty beaten down over the past year, and we do have some real meaningful news driving this this increase. And also, one thing to keep in mind is that it has been a big priority of Trump to basically kind of cut off Russia from this oil market, you can say. As we've seen many times, especially over the past few weeks, he's really been trying to get India to reduce their purchases of Russian oil. And I think in a broader sense, this will have a positive impact on oil prices like we're already seeing. So OXY is definitely on my bullish radar over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I know that Trump had actually been talking about oil prices getting down to gas prices getting down to $2 a gallon. And obviously he was looking at oil to go down a little bit, but I don't know how that's going to happen whenever they're, doing sanctions on Russia and we see oil starting to pump up as much as we are in the short term. If oil starts to really hold this lower support range around 55 to 56, I could see these oil companies like Oxy, Zom, CVX, and others really starting to come back in the short term. And again, this is a huge support range on oil, so keep it on the radar. It is actively bouncing and there's real news to back it up. But with my first setup, I'm looking at Tesla to the upside. I loved Tesla's price action in the middle of the day today. I know that yesterday, whenever they reported earnings, it looked like Tesla was dying and they weren't going to be coming back anytime soon. But as the market opened today, they actually flushed a little bit lower, but then roared back to life. And everybody's actually grasping to the news that there was some hype related to their energy storage business on this last earnings report. This business actually grew 44% in the last quarter, and their energy generation and storage segments represent 12.2% of their business, but this is growing. It's actually up from 10.3% in the prior year. Either way, though, I was kind of surprised to see everybody cling to this today and push the stock higher, but Tesla has a lot going on besides their EVs. Of course, Optimus has helped spur a lot of the buying pressure this year. We can see how Tesla had recently been breaking out and up closer to this $450 resistance. Now, for tomorrow, as I look at Tesla, it's straddling 450. That was essentially the high of day from today. This has acted as resistance a lot in the past. If we can see a meaningful push past this sell wall where there's 279,000 shares that were stacked up around the end of the day today, shout out to Bookmap, then watch it to the upside. I think there could be great scalping opportunities, but first things first, we just have to get through this sell wall. 450 is a major psychological level, and we can actually see the shares actively stacked up there.
Yeah, it's a big level to watch. What I really do like with Tesla, though, is even though it started out its earnings reaction in a very negative way, bulls held very strong today and actually had the stock close up in a pretty strong way. So let's definitely keep this one close on watch. Tesla's one of those companies that definitely stands out in terms of just like momentum, and it's especially a retail favorite. So let's keep it close on watch. But another stock that's on my radar is UVXY, and it's to the upside. In the event tomorrow's CPI data comes in hotter than everyone expects, and let's say everyone starts to sell out of the market, UVXY is a stock that can do very well on those types of days. As we can see when we zoom out, it really crushed it on Friday, October 10th, when everyone was panic selling the market when there was that increase in U.S.-China trade tensions. UVXY increased by 19% that day, and when the market's panicking, this does very well. Most of the time, because the market generally goes up, this ETF will fall. So it's important to only consider playing this one in the event we actually are seeing some real panic selling. So for that reason, I think it would be best to wait for some confirmation. At this point, it would be nice to see UVXY get above that like $10.80 area, maybe even $11 if you want to, be a little bit more conservative for a potential breakout.
Yeah, it has moved a lot in the short term, and we've really seen some great price action out of UVXY whenever the market does have a negative reaction. So if we do see that CPI reading end up coming in pretty hot, keep your eyes on UVXY. It can definitely move in a crazy way. Even this week, there was like an intraday move with UVXY that was 9%, almost pushing 10% there. But with my next setup, I'm looking at SMR, and I'm still watching it for a possible snipe off of support. I called this one out yesterday, and I was looking at how much SMR and these nuclear stocks fell in the short term. We can see SMR had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 huge red trading days in a row before bouncing off of this $32 area. This was a big buy wall area too, around 30 to 32, where a lot of buyers were stacked up. Today, we did see that bounce higher, and SMR ended up breaking pre-market highs and running up very well around the end of the day. I think that we could continue up tomorrow for a second leg up. If we end up seeing a breakout above 38.25, watch for the continuation. I saw a lot of people hyping up this in the Discord today as well.
There we go. All right, well, let's jump right into today's momentum plays then. And with the first one, we have Wynn Resorts, ticker symbol WYNN, to the upside.
Yeah, the casino stocks did very well today. If Wynn can break out above 126.90, watch it up.
All right, with the next one, we have Bloom Energy, ticker symbol BE, also to the upside.
Nice movement today. If they can break out above 103.80, watch them to the upside as well.
And then with the last one, we have MP Materials, ticker symbol MP, but to the downside.
Oh, the rare earth stocks have been fading a bit. If MP falls down under 68, watch them to the downside.
All right, so we have these three stocks on the radar for potential continuations tomorrow, if and only if they break through the levels listed. You guys know the drill. These stocks are volatile, so whether you trade one of these three stocks or quite frankly anything else, make sure to protect yourself above anything else. Make smart, long-term oriented trading decisions, and if you need help with that, check out the Key Lessons channel of the StockedUp Discord. It is completely free. And Tom, let's jump right into the real fun stuff for today, which is the $1.1 million big money trade. And we are looking at ticker symbol XOP. So XOP is an ETF that follows the oil and gas exploration and production industry. As you can imagine, with oil prices rising, especially related to this new sanctions on Russia news, this has positively benefited this ETF. Today, the trader here bought the 137 strike call options that expire on December 19th of 2025. This is a $1.1 million trade. These options are somewhat far out of the money, nothing unreasonable, but they definitely are a decent amount out of the money. They do have a fair amount of time to them though, and basically by the trader here selecting these options, it's showing that they are happy to accept the trade-off of a lower win rate for a higher payout in the event XOP continues up. I like the risk reward here, but for this trade to work out, XOP is going to need like a nice move, which I certainly think is reasonable, and I'm excited to see how it ends up progressing.
Yeah, and we've seen periods where XOP has jumped from, levels to where we are kind of right now to around that 137 point. And, if we have an ultra short term move up, it doesn't necessarily have to hit 137, but if we get there pretty quickly, maybe that could obviously help in the ultra short term. But whenever I look at this play, there's some big resistance overhead around that 140 point. If XOP would go up and, retest 140, that would be perfect. It would put this play in the money, at least for a little while it tested 140. And we can see the last time it got there, it didn't stay there for very long, but I am watching that overhead range carefully. I would think that if we do start to rise, that would be a good zone for a target. I do like that lower support range too, around 122 to 124, where it bounced recently. We've actually held that range a couple times over the past few months, and I'm not surprised to see it bouncing here. Again, the last time it bounced off that range, it got all the way up to 140.
Exactly. Yeah, so it can definitely move, and it's definitely an interesting trade to get filled, especially as we have this news with Russia. So either way, keep it close on watch, and if you are new to the channel, welcome, and consider obliterating that subscribe button. Every single day, we do multiple hours of research to cover everything you need to know in the markets, whether it be breaking events, important earnings to watch out for. In today's case, the key CPI data for tomorrow, big money trades, SPY levels and analysis, hot stocks keep on watch, and much more. If you subscribe, you'll get our videos recommended to you more often. And Tom, let's also give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Chase, in the StockedUp Discord, who had some great improvement over the past year. So huge shout out to you, Chase. Keep up the great work and keep on rolling. If you guys are into short-term trading, definitely check out that first link in the description in the comments down below. We had some nice movement out of our Surge bot today, where we had some VZ put options move up by 241%, T put options move up by 200%, AA call options by 112%, Dow call options by 68%. The list goes on. And of course, there were a handful of duds mixed in there as well. You'll get full access to our army of custom trading robots, access to the big money trades that are posted every single day before we talk about them in these nightly videos. And you could also see which big money trades are actively moving up the most in real time. One really cool feature that a lot of people like to use is our BMP strongest command, where essentially you could see which big money plays are moving up the most. So like as we can see here, when we enter it, we can see that the GLW call options are up 1,180%. The BABA call options are up 537%. The GSK call options are up 288%, and so on. There's so many cool things like this that you can access. We have weekly live events as well. It's the place to be if you're into short-term trading, so definitely check it out, and you can save quite a bit with coupon code BIGMONEY down below. But thank you all so much for watching, and let's close out the week strongly.